Hey guys, and welcome back. As you may have gleaned from the title of this video, today we will be discussing kidnapping. So let's start with the basics and see the sections first.
Before we start our video, I want to let you guys know that our videos have just hit 100,000 views, that is 0.1 million views. We are just so overwhelmed with this news that our videos have been watched 0.1 million times, and that's huge for us. The amount of love and appreciation we get from you guys is amazing, and we've created this nice corner in this internet world which is filled with trolls and it is filled with hateful people. We've created this nice corner where we can ideate and we can exchange useful information and we can be together in pursuit of knowledge. We are so lucky to have this channel where you guys are so nice and the community that we've created here is so nice. Everyone is respectful, everyone is mild-mannered and polite. So we're really lucky to have this place where we can exchange ideas and we can help you achieve your dreams. And that gives us a lot of fulfillment. So we're so happy that our videos hit 100,000 views. Thank you so much for the continued love and support, and without any further delay, let's just get into the video of the day.
Section 359 says that kidnapping can be of two kinds. There is kidnapping from India and kidnapping from lawful guardianship. Section 360 provides kidnapping from India, which says that whoever conveys any person beyond the limits of India without the consent of that person or some legally authorized person is said to kidnap that person from India. So for this, all that's required is someone picks up physically a person and then conveys them beyond the limits of India. So just makes them cross the border anywhere. It can be to Bangladesh, to Pakistan, to somewhere far, to somewhere further. So as long as a person is conveyed beyond the borders of India without that person's consent, it's kidnapping under section 360. The punishment for kidnapping can range up to a term of 7 years and will also be liable to fine. The person who kidnaps will also be liable to fine. Now, let's come to the important section, the section which will be the core of our discussion today. That is section 361. Kidnapping from lawful guardianship. So, let's take a look at section. It says that whoever takes or entices any minor under 16 years of age if male and under 18 years of age if female, or any person of unsound mind out of the keeping of the lawful guardian of such minor or person of unsound mind without the consent of such guardian is said to kidnap such minor from lawful guardianship. We will come to these points in detail later, but let's just take a look at the explanation and the exception as well, and we will discuss above mentioned points in detail a little bit later. So the explanation says that the word lawful guardian in this section includes any person lawfully entrusted with the care and custody of such minor or other person. So you can see that this is a lawful guardian who is entrusted with care and custody. This is not a legal guardian, and you may know that the legal guardian is a father under Hindu law unless he is incapable. So this is not legal guardian, this is lawful guardian. So anyone who's entrusted with the care of the minor. So remember this differentiation, that kidnapping is from lawful guardian. Anyone who's entrusted with the child. Doesn't have to be the father, doesn't have to be the legal guardian. Now, for example, warden in a hostel would also be a lawful guardian because the parents have entrusted their child with the warden. Or a relative on a family trip will also be a lawful guardian because he's been entrusted with the child. He doesn't have to be the legal guardian. Someone kidnaps from the relative or from the warden, then it will still be considered kidnapping from the lawful guardian. Now let's take a look at the exceptions. It says that this section does not extend to the act of any person who in good faith believes himself to be the father of an illegitimate child, or who in good faith believes himself to be entitled to lawful custody of such child. So if anybody believes in good faith that he is the father of the illegitimate child or that he is entitled to lawful custody and he takes the child, he will not be considered a kidnapper and he will not be liable for kidnapping, provided there is good faith. So the person will have to prove that they in good faith believed that they were entitled to legal custody or they believed that they were the father of the illegitimate child. However, there is an exception to this exception, which further says that unless such act is committed for immoral or unlawful purpose. So even if someone believes in good faith that they are the father of the child, illegitimate child, or they believe in good faith that they are entitled to lawful custody, they take the child. But if they're taking it for immoral or unlawful purpose, they would still be liable for kidnapping. If they take the child for any good purpose, for believing in good faith that they are the father or the person who's entitled to legal custody, not liable for kidnapping. Take the child for immoral purpose, even if you are the father of the illegitimate child, or even if you are entitled to good lawful custody, they would still be liable. So, now let's get in detail into the first 4 points of this section. That is where the entire law lies. So the first thing you can see is that there is strict liability, which means that no mens rea is required. So there is no mention of intention. This is called strict liability. You don't have to have any intention. Even if you take or entice the child without intention and you say that I had no bad intention, you would still be liable for kidnapping. For more on this, you can check out the case of R versus Prince. The second point of section 361 is takes or entices. Whoever takes or entices a minor or an unsound person. What does take or entice mean? So the perpetrator has to take the minor physically. Now taking can be either with force or without force. That is the meaning of taking physically the minor or the unsound person. Also, the perpetrator might entice the minor. Now, what does enticement means? Enticement would be taking the minor by giving some attraction or temptation, by luring the minor. So, for example, let's say there's a kid, the perpetrator goes to the kid and shows them a lot of chocolates and gifts and candy and says, come on, get in my van, and I will give you all these gifts. So that would be enticement, and you can understand it as lalach dena. So if the perpetrator gives some kind of lalach to the child, some kind of enticement to the minor or the unsound person, and takes them by enticement, then that would also fall within the definition of kidnapping. So it's either taking or enticement. Persuasion or promise to marry are also considered enticement. Persuasion or promise to marry are considered enticement. This was held in the case of S. Vardarajan versus State of Madras, which is a 1965 Supreme Court judgment, and also in T.D. Vadgama versus State of Gujarat, which is 1973 Supreme Court judgment. So if someone entices a young girl who's 16 years old with gifts or with promise to marry, it will be considered kidnapping. So we have seen the meaning of taking or enticement. The other thing is that the person kidnapped, if it's a female, should be less than 18, and if it's a male, should be less than 16. Or it can be a person of unsound mind. So it has to be a minor or unsound mind person. And who's a minor? A minor is a female who's less than 18 and a male who's less than 16. The next important point of section 361 is that the perpetrator or the kidnapper should take the minor out of the keeping of lawful guardian. We know that it has to be he has to take or entice the minor. Who the minor is, we've understood. Now we have to understand that the kidnapper has to take the minor out of the keeping of lawful guardian. Now this is a very important term, out of keeping. What keeping means, let's understand that. Keeping of a lawful guardian means protection or control or charge of a guardian. The lawful guardian is in charge of the minor is under the protection, under the control of the lawful guardian, then that is considered keeping. Now keeping can be a very broad term. It can be direct or it can be constructive.
Direct keeping would be when the child is kidnapped from home or from anywhere outside of home where he is with the lawful guardian. Let's say the lawful guardian and the child go to a market, and from there the child is kidnapped. That is direct keeping of the lawful guardian. He was with the protection, control, and charge of the lawful guardian. So if somebody takes them from there, it is out of keeping directly. But there is also constructive keeping. So when your child is at school, or when the child goes for a school trip, or with a relative for a family trip, in those cases he is not directly, even though the child is not physically under the protection and control of the lawful guardian, if someone takes the child from the school physically or entices the child, that would still be kidnapping. The kidnapper cannot say that, hello, your child was not in your keeping, he or she was in school, so I took the child from school. That means that they were not in keeping. That is not correct. Keeping can be direct or it can be constructive. If the child is alone playing in the park, the child is still under constructive keeping of the lawful guardian. So a kidnapper cannot say that I picked up the child from the park, he was all alone. He was alone, but he was still under constructive keeping of the lawful guardian. In all these cases, the lawful guardian is not physically present, but the child or the minor will still be considered to be in keeping of the lawful guardian. So now you understand the keeping of lawful guardian, and keeping can be a broad term. It has to be interpreted broadly. So in every respect, the child is considered within the keeping of the lawful guardian. The next point is that the kidnapper should take out of keeping of the guardian without consent. So if the person taking the child takes the minor out of keeping of the guardian, but with the guardian's consent, it will not be kidnapping. But if it is without the guardian's consent, then it will be kidnapping. So let's say a driver goes and picks up an employer's child from the school. Is he kidnapping? No, he's not kidnapping because he's been directed to do so. The driver has expressed consent of the employer to go and take the child from the school. So this is with consent. However, if the driver goes and picks up the child without consent and then takes him somewhere else, that is kidnapping. So the important thing is that the kidnapper should take the child or the minor out of the keeping without consent. Also, you should understand that consent can be express or implied. Let's say your child is playing in the park and a van comes and hits the child, and there is a disastrous accident, and there are exceptional urgent circumstances. In such a case, if the neighbor picks up the child and rushes the child to the hospital, then he has implied consent of the lawful guardian to take the child to the hospital. He is not taking the child out of keeping of the lawful guardian without consent. There is implied consent in that. So if there are any such exigent, exceptional circumstances, we can interpret implied consent in it. But apart from that, there has to be express consent. And if there is no express consent of the lawful guardian, then the minor or the unsound person is being kidnapped. Whenever I say the child or the minor, please understand that in that I include a male, a female, who's respectively less than 16 and 18, and also an unsound person. So if I ever say child or minor, it includes all three of these. So now we've understood that what taking or enticement means. We understand that who can be kidnapped. We understand that it has to be that the kidnapper has to take the child or the minor or the unsound person out of keeping of the lawful guardian. What keeping means, it can be direct or constructive. And we also understand that when they're taking the child or the minor or the unsound person out of keeping, it has to be without consent. If it is with consent, there is no kidnapping. If it is without consent, there is kidnapping. Also, consent can be express or implied. So that's basic crux of it. Another question which is often asked is, can the child abandon the keeping of the lawful guardian? So what happens if the child runs away from home? It is possible. The child can abandon the keeping of the lawful guardian. For example, the child runs away from home and instead of going to the railway station where he finds the adorable chacha with the jalebi, in this case he goes to an auto rickshaw wala and he says, drive me to my nani's house in XYZ area. In this case, he's already abandoned the keeping. So when the auto rickshaw person takes the child to his nani's house or to his relative's house or to his friend's house, the auto rickshaw wala is not liable for kidnapping because the child is already out of the keeping. He's already abandoned it. So the auto rickshaw one will not be charged with kidnapping. However, if the child gives the address of one place and the auto rickshaw person takes him to another place because he wants to abduct him or he wants to keep the child to himself for whatever unlawful purpose, he takes the child somewhere else,
then that would be abduction.
to the destination given by the child, the auto rickshaw person is not liable for kidnapping. So what you need to understand is that a child must be in the keeping of the lawful guardian for the child to be taken out of the keeping without consent. And keeping has to be given a broad interpretation where for most purposes the child will be considered in the keeping of the lawful guardian. There is no mens rea required. You take the child out of the keeping without consent, done. You're going down for kidnapping. Now abduction is different from kidnapping. Anyone can be abducted even if they are above 16 or 18. In some cases kidnapping and abduction may even overlap. So if you want, we can do a video on abduction as well, so that's kidnapping for you under the Indian Penal Code. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Make sure you subscribe so you get notified of new videos.